So Russia's misinformation, disinformation, and propaganda campaign continues to unfold on Twitter, with Vladimir Putin telling the West to stop creating an image of an enemy out of Russia. You've thought up that Russia wants to attack NATO. Have you gone completely crazy? Is what Vladimir is saying. It's a nonsense which is used to fool and scare the Western population. There is no such threat. Now we're going to listen to what Vlad had to say specifically.
Не надо формировать образ врага из России. Вы сами себе только вредите этим, понимаете? Вот напридумывали, что Россия хочет напасть на НАТО. Вы сбрендили совсем, что ли? Тупые вообще, как этот стол? Кто это придумал? Это чушь, понимаете? Бред собачий. Но это было бы бредом, да? Если бы не было задумкой для того, чтобы одурачивать свое собственное население. Говорить, караул, скоро Россия на нас нападет, и мы должны срочно вооружаться, срочно, значит, направлять вооружение, значит, на Украину. А на самом деле для чего это делать? Шерстское положение и величие. Вот для чего это делается. Вот для чего эти угрозы и пугалки для бюргеров в Германии, во Франции и в других частях Европы. Вот для чего. Такой угрозы не существует и быть не может. Мы сами себя защищаем на Украине.
So Vladimir Putin sits there and lies, obviously. He lies. One of the main reasons why he's lying is because he insinuates this NATO lie, this NATO machination, this NATO conception of, they're lying to their populace, they're misleading their populace, painting this picture that we want to harm NATO. We don't mean you any harm. We're defending ourselves in Ukraine. The reality is this. Russia has a threat problem. As Vladimir Putin sits there on that screen and lies about how they're not a threat, they would never threaten the United States or NATO, they mean no harm to the rest of NATO, they mean no harm to anyone. We know that's not true. See, Russia's former president, Dmitry Medvedev, threatened the Baltic states, Sweden, and Finland because some of them wanted to join NATO. Now, as some of you guys know, Sweden and Finland joined NATO, I believe so. And while they were in the process of joining NATO, Dmitry Medvedev threatened their sovereignty. Now, why do you think these nations wanted to join NATO? They wanted to join NATO because they don't want to be overtaken by the Russian horde that's forcing itself upon Ukraine. They don't want to be invaded. They don't want their lives upended. They don't want their lives to be ended. They don't want millions of people being forced from their homes. They don't want their civilian infrastructure being bombed into oblivion by Russia. Vladimir Putin can talk an amazing game. He can lie, and he can manipulate conservatives and populists in the West to believe all this foolishness. But when Sweden and Finland, sovereign states who reserve the right to join NATO, applied for NATO membership, Dmitry Medvedev, Russia's enforcer, made threats to their sovereignty. If you want me to believe you mean no harm to NATO and it's simply a you and Ukraine problem, stop threatening NATO states. You can't bring yourself to do that, can you? You genuinely can't. You absolutely cannot help yourself. Furthermore, you've constantly and consistently threatened nuclear war yourself. With these fan fiction scenarios, if NATO threatens Russian sovereignty, we will deploy nuclear weapons. Excuse me, sir. We have never, ever threatened your sovereignty. We won't even allow Ukraine to utilize NATO weapons behind Russian borders, behind Russian lines. The only region in which they are allowed to strike behind the Russian border is the Kharkiv region. They are not allowed to blow up the Kremlin. You know that. We know that. We're being really, really nice to you. You are the one who spent the utmost amount of time trying to paint narratives of villainy from NATO. You're the one who tried to portray NATO as a villainous entity. And then when Tucker Carlson, like the good little boy he is, came to Russia to do the interview with you and tried to do isn't NATO so horrible, so evil, so malevolent, so malicious, you didn't want to engage in that conversation with him. Instead, you gave everyone, millions around the world waiting for this interview, you gave us a Crusader Kings 3 dissertation about how, 1,000 years ago, Russia, had the territory now known today as Ukraine. This is what we're dealing with. This is what we're dealing with here. The kind of insanity, double talk, and gaslighting that we have to deal with in the world. A guy like Vladimir Putin, who sits there and says, oh, you know, Russia has no interest in attacking NATO. Really? Is that why you hinged your entire attack on Ukraine because they were joining NATO? This whole narrative of, oh, you know, if Ukraine joins NATO, NATO will be on our border, and that's bad for our national security. Good work, dummies. Because now, as a result of your attack on Ukraine, Sweden and Finland have now joined the club. Congrats. Like, not only are y'all retarded, you're dishonest. Poland already bordered you before. And the United States is across the pond in Alaska. You're surrounded. You've always been surrounded. Ukraine joining NATO does not change anything. At all. Now, if you were actually a good leader and you genuinely wanted what was best for the Russian people, this wouldn't be a conversation. What would be happening right now is you would be focusing on the economic development of the Russian people. You would not be worried about war. You would not be damaging the Russian economy and the Russian people's psyche with a war. But instead, here we are. It's unbelievably sad and unfortunate. This is what we have to deal with. This is what we have happening here. But every month, Dmitry Medvedev, the former president of Russia, issues nuclear threats to NATO and the West all the time. Imagine if Barack Obama hopped on Twitter and just started typing away to Vladimir Putin, threatening to blow up each and every single person inside of Russia. Imagine if George W. was on Twitter talking mad shit. Imagine if fucking Clinton, if he can even talk, much less type. You know, he's old as shit. Imagine if he sat there and was threatening anyone. It would be unthinkable of an American president to behave in that way. But in Russia, this level of professionalism, if you could even call it that, is okay. I mean, look at what the fuck they got going on over there. This is the guy who sat there and said, we're invading Ukraine to denazify Ukraine, and then the man sits there and hires neo-Nazis to do his dirty work. And then, after fiddle fucking with them and playing with them and trying to sabotage them, they launch a fucking rebellion against him. He shoots them out of the sky. This is the kind of guy we're dealing with here. Vladimir Putin. This man hired neo-Nazis to do his dirty work in Ukraine, realized they were becoming way too powerful, tried to fiddle them, and then when Prigozhin tried to turn on him, he let Prigozhin go for a little bit, but eventually killed him. This is the guy who implores us that he means no harm. This is the same guy who sat there and said, we're not going to be invading Ukraine. We would never do anything like that. We'd never invade Ukraine. We would never, ever, 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 ever invade Ukraine. This is what the fuck we're dealing with, bro. This is what we're dealing with as the West. We're dealing with a man who double speaks every 5 seconds and has so many conservative MAGA supporters in the United States, so many right-wingers in Europe embracing him. When in reality, this man is a bold-faced liar. This man is sitting there talking about, so we mean no harm to NATO. Is that why the former president of Russia, the man who you have leadership and superiority over, is threatening the world and NATO with nuclear annihilation every month? Look it up. Dmitry Medvedev has a new nuclear threat for the West every month. I'm not exaggerating. When I say month, that is an accurate measurement of time in between each threat. You can go on Reddit and look up Dmitry Medvedev nuclear threat. Each month of 2023 and 2024 has its own threat. Now, I want you to imagine if Barack Obama was shooting off threats to Russia of nuclear annihilation every month. We would all wonder what's going on with Barack. Has he hit his head? Has he lost his mind? Had the hose gotten to him? Had the drugs got... We'd all be wondering what's going on with Barack. But because it's Russia, we just shrug our shoulders because we know they're fucking crazy. This is what we're putting up with, bro. This is the type of shit we have to deal with. And they want Trump back in office to deal with Putin. They want Trump back in office to deal with Putin. This is what the fuck we got to put up with, bro. A nigga like Trump, who when asked, who do you want to win the war in Ukraine, is sitting there like, I just want people to stop dying. As if that's an answer. As if because you want peace, peace is all of a sudden going to come about. And as if you force Ukraine to give in, they're actually going to give in. And let's just say Europe wasn't going to supply them with weapons in the event that we pulled out. You still have to contend with the fact that a Russian victory means the genocide of the Ukrainian people. Just because the war is over does not mean there's actual peace and tranquility and benevolence taking place in the land of Ukraine. But this is what we're dealing with. Like, I know I keep saying that, but real talk, like, this is what the fuck we're putting up with. Precipice of World War III, Donald Trump running for president. Like, like, bro, why couldn't Trump just talk shit about Barack Obama on the internet? Like, that was fun. He can't do that. He can't. Like, bro, that was fun. Like, bro, when Trump was disrespecting Obama every 5 seconds and dissing him and talking about something, he took the gum out of his mouth. You can't do that. Like, that was fun. I enjoyed Trump when he wasn't risking the democracy of this nation and the security of all of our allies and ourselves. Before now, it was fun. Now it's not fun anymore. So, it's unfortunate, but Vladimir Putin thinks he can lie to everybody, but gee, we have the internet. We can see everything you say. I know Tucker Carlson tried to make it seem like the world was blocking you from like having access to the internet, but like, we see you, we've seen you, we know what you're saying, we've heard what you're saying. Like, we're not dumb. But anyways, like, comment, subscribe. I'm out.